Arturo Sandoval.
Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. It's Election Day, which means it's time for everybody in the world to just get absolutely bonkers nuts. People are going to hate their families. They're going to hate their friends, but I don't hate any of you. In fact, I love and appreciate each and every one of you for checking in on YouTube, Facebook, and X. It is, listen, I will be very clear. Let me be clear. I thought about it. I was like, do I do an entire episode where I just do really bad presidential impressions? And I said, no. No, we won't. Maybe we will. But I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? All that happened. I woke up this morning, and I went, man. I looked at Facebook, and it's like I have a bunch of people who are like, preserve democracy, and I had the whole bunch of people who are like, preserve freedom, and I'm like, I need you people to just shut the hell up. I have been bombarded with commercial after commercial after commercial. My mailbox, my actual physical mailbox has been full of multicolored, glossy ads. My email has been flooded by 2 presidential campaigns, by multiple Senate races. Leave me alone! And we're so close. We are so unbelievably close to being done this election season. And I'll tell you what, I said in the description of the episode that I'm very excited, with some positives, okay? Here's a positive. I went to vote this morning with my kids, and the Independence table gave my kids pieces of candy. That was nice. They got their stickers. That was nice. There were people. Some people were wearing Trump hats. Some people were wearing Harris hats. And you know what? They all acted like normal people to each other. There weren't anybody pointing and yelling and screaming and acting like goddamn psychopaths, like what happens on social media and what happens sometimes. People were just acting like normal human beings. They were interacting, and they're like, I don't necessarily like your candidate, but it's good that you're voting. And I stood there with my kids, and I was like, this is what it's all about. This is what we do. This is what an election day is supposed to be. People from the same community just going out, being nice to each other, recognizing that they might not agree, but they're being nice to each other. And I will tell you this really quick anecdote, really quick, before we get into the sports conversation here today, because I'm not telling you who I voted for. I can guarantee you that there would be just as many people who would assume that I voted for Trump as I did for Harris. This happens all the time. My social media, often I get accused of being a lib. Then I get other people who say that I must be a Trumper. And I'm like, I hate all of you. But here's like a fun little thing, okay? Here's my parental advice. Do you want parental advice out there today? I'll give you a little bit of unsolicited parental advice. Last night, I'm driving with my 7-year-old, and he goes, Dad, friend's name said that his or her parents are voting for candidate. Does that change our friendship? And I said, well, no, of course it doesn't. Why would it change your friendship? That has nothing to do with anything. Like, you're 7. Who cares? Who cares who your friend's parents are voting for? It doesn't change anything. No, you and your friend are still friends. And then my son was like, well, what happens if somebody asks me if I support Trump or Harris? And I said, you're 7. You don't know anything about these people. You don't know anything about any of them other than what you've seen in commercials. That is your extent. My wife and I actively do not talk to the kids about politics. Now, there might be some psycho who watches the show or listens to it who says, you can't tell your kids about blah, 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 blah. No, they're kids. Kids are supposed to be left the hell alone. You just let them live their lives, have their friends, and you just act like a normal human being. And you hope that that's a thing that sticks with them, that we treat everybody the same, even if they agree or they disagree. And that's where you leave it at. So election day, I can promise you, I have my desk in my office, but my desk is on wheels. And I think I'm going to wheel it out into the main part of the basement where I have the gigantic TV. And I'm going to pull up YouTube TV, and I'm going to do the multi-view that has it's Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and what's the bottom right? BBC News. I'm going to have all 4 of those up on the screen all day. And I'm just going to go toggling back and forth because I live for today's like today. I love election day. I do. Whether the people I vote for win or lose, I genuinely don't care. But I just enjoy watching as things unfold. I love, what the hell's the guy's name? There's John King on CNN, and is it Kornacki on the NBC networks who are at the big board and they like zoom in on all the counties. I will tell you, if I could pick one job to do, I don't know if it would be that. But the thought of like having to know the most minute townships within specific counties, I am always flabbergasted watching these people standing at the big boards. And they're like, over here in Delaware County, we're going to pull up Springfield. Or they'll be like, up here in Schuylkill County, we're going to go check out Casca, which has like 50 people in it. We're going to look at Casca. They're all going to vote Republican. But Casca, I find it fascinating. I genuinely do. I found that the entire lead up to this was enjoyable, even though I hate the commercials. I found it enjoyable. I listened to right-leaning and left-leaning podcasts. I listened to one or two that I tried to find that were sort of in the middle, but I have enjoyed this. I am probably mentally ill for enjoying election season as much as I do, but I am fascinated. Can I offer one final point? Yes, it's my show. I do what I want. I'm like Cartman. I do what I want. What I am most fascinated by, what I genuinely want to see happen. I want to see how long it takes for them to figure out who wins, right? It sounds like the belief is that I think it was Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia. They think that they should have a pretty good read on by tonight. I think that's what the Harris campaign put out last night. Maybe they have good internal polling numbers to make them think that it's going to be a blowout. I have no idea. We saw there was an Iowa poll that's kind of crazy. Maybe. Will it take Pennsylvania 3 days to verify the results? Like, I will be interested in that. And ultimately, I want to see if the person who loses says, I lost, or what that looks like. I think many people expect that if Trump loses, he's going to do the whole thing where there's going to be the fraud thing. I genuinely wonder if Harris loses, does she come out and actually give like a nice concession speech? Does she kind of give a half-hearted one and then like some of the old heads kind of throw mud? Like, I will be very clear, I don't think that there's a scenario here where either candidate loses and goes off gracefully into the night. I think that this is going to end up being, tonight we'll have the results of however many states. It'll probably take 2 or 3 more days at the very least to try to verify, especially Pennsylvania, because for some reason we can't get it right in this state. And I fully expect there to be a recount no matter what. I would expect lawsuits no matter what. I think it's actually going to be kind of ugly no matter who wins. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all and everything just goes off hunky-dory. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that given the way that things are right now, that I'm probably right. Now, Lawrence Fine checks in over on YouTube and says he loves politics. Ford says it'll take days, could be weeks. Lawrence thinks that lawsuits are going to be next. This ain't over by a long shot. I made, and Spiral Out here is good. It says unite, don't divide more. I agree. I'm just making a very basic note here, and please note, I'm saying that I think no matter who wins, this is going to be long. There's going to be a recount. There could be lawsuits. I don't think that there's just like one, it's only going to be one or the other. I think no matter what, it's going to be a long process. I have friends who are left-leaning and right-leaning who agree and disagree with that statement. I genuinely don't care, okay? Mr. Twitster checks it. It says, nothing, it's over. John Rambo. I love it. Jim Cochran checks in over on YouTube and says, who doesn't love hearing about meaningless exit polls for 15 hours straight? I'm sick. I really do enjoy it. One of the things that I like the most about the election season itself is we have seen polling. Like, if you don't pay attention to any of this, it's totally fine. I only usually pay attention right before a presidential election. I'll start right before the primaries. I'll start as you start figuring out like who's going to run on both sides. I enjoy that part of it. And then I'll kind of like cue in on it for a while because I think it's actually interesting and I like watching the process kind of play out. No matter who gets elected on either side, I just enjoy it. I still think the two-party system sucks. I still think that Democrats and Republicans actively try to suppress having a third-party candidate on the stage. They did that again this time by foregoing the Council on Elections or whatever the hell it's called so that they didn't have to let like an RFK or a Jill Stein or whoever else on the stage. I think it's bullshit. I think it's stupid, but it is what it is. But I enjoy watching how the polls move. I enjoy when you go back and you look at what this race looked like in the beginning of 2024. It was like the matchup no one wanted again in Biden and Trump. This is like a crazy year. We've lived through many years of this like whole unprecedented times. Like just think for a second of where we were Like 10 months ago, we were very much on a crash course with Biden versus Trump. And then the debate happens and Biden is gone. Trump, there's an assassination attempt. You watch the polls swing crazy, erratically, either way. And now in the months that have followed, we've watched those polls go crazy again. The Iowa one is bonkers. And the Seltzer poll that shows that Harris is up significantly in Iowa, which is typically a put it in the bank for Republicans. I love watching this play out in real time. And then in the aftermath, watching all of these political pundits who have thought that they knew what was going to happen for months, they have to sit there and kind of reconcile in their minds, how did we get here? We thought it was going to go this way, but in fact, it went this way instead. What happened? So anyway, I find all of this really fascinating. You might, and it's okay if you don't, but I hope that everybody does go out and vote. I always I put my flag in the ground on this. There are a lot of people who have given their lives to protect our country and our right to vote. And if for no other reason, I think people should go out and vote, even if you're not in a swing state. I know a coworker of mine lives in New Jersey. He's like, I'm not going to go vote. My vote doesn't matter in New Jersey. I was like, you should still go out and vote. Like, you should still go out and vote for those people. If for no other reason, like, go vote for the people who died for the country, right? I will say really quickly, and I'd love to know in the comments, because I know that there are people who check in from outside of PA or outside of swing states. The commercials, I mean, like, they've been crazy for a while, but for the people who aren't in Pennsylvania, like, I just want you to understand what an absolute hellscape TV has been. Now, I don't watch a lot of live TV. It's pretty much around sports, and in recent days, it's been around election coverage. But like yesterday, I'm watching, I had CNN on. I had like the 4-box, the CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and BBC thing. And I'm watching, and CNN goes to commercial, and it was, I think, a 6-commercial block. 5 of them were political ads. It was like, we went Harris, Trump, Casey McCormick. Maybe it was a 5 block, because then the last one was Macy's, and then it went back to the show. And I was like, 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6. I'm like, it's nonstop. And it's been this way for weeks. I mean, it had been like 2 or 3 out of every 5 or 6 had been political. But like, as of yesterday, it was like almost every commercial was political. My kids, who I don't put them on the YouTube TV Kids thing, because like I'd seen all those weird things about like the algorithm pushing YouTube Kids people into like really not great places on YouTube. But like, they've just gotten into this thing where they mute. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. It doesn't matter what the ad is. They just mute. And it's like, it is wild to me, because I'll sit and like watch, say like a How Ridiculous These Aussie Guys. They're hilarious. They do this like channel, sort of like Dude Perfect, but not exactly. And it's like their ads, or the ads that are dynamically inserted on YouTube, are mostly political ads, right? Kids will watch something about like Crunch Labs. They'll watch Mark Rober. Same thing. The one thing that I'm like thankful for, I guess, this election cycle has been the Dude Perfect app. They don't sponsor the show, but like they only allow kids ads in their app. So there's no political ads there. But if my kids are just on YouTube, on the channels that we approve and have them subscribe to, which are mostly like science-y kind of or fun channels, it's almost all political ads. And I'm like, why are we putting political ads? Because you can control that, right? Like you could control to some extent what kind of ads display in videos. Why are we putting political ads on very clearly defined like kids channels? I don't understand it. But I'm glad that it's almost over. I said to my boys and to my daughter yesterday, the 2-year-old doesn't, or almost 2-year-old doesn't understand any of this, but I said to those 3, I'm like, on a positive note, we aren't going to have to mute the TV anytime we're watching something now. Now we're going to go back to car commercials. We're going to get a ton of Christmas ads. You know damn well, like we're going to have, there was that Big Lots commercial the one year. We're going to get the Wingstop commercials back. Like it's going to be absolutely insane. And maybe I'll actually long for the days of having the political ads, but I am so excited genuinely to be done with that. I'm going to go over to the comments, and then we're going to move the conversation forward because we do have some Philly sports things to get into today. But you know what? I figured anytime we've done the election thing, we put it at the end of the episode, but I like to play it right down the middle. Now, am I totally down the middle on everything? No. Am I ever going to tell you how I really feel? Probably not. No. I actually did have a conversation with somebody a couple days ago. And I was like, when you're a teacher, this is going to trigger Ford because I said I was a teacher. When you're a teacher, you have to try to play the middle as much as you can, or you have to, or you can like openly talk, at least where I taught, you could openly talk about things if you were very left-leaning. You couldn't, if you were even a moderate, you could barely toe that line without there being a complaint from a parent who like hears that you maybe said, a kid overheard you in the hallway saying that you think both candidates suck. That happened a few years ago. There was a kid who heard me say, I think both of these people stink, about Trump and Biden. I was like, I think they both stink. I'll go vote, but I don't like either of them. And I had a parent who sent me an email and was like, my kid heard you say that and blah, 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 and this is why you should vote for Biden. And I was like, please shut the fuck up. Genuinely, please shut the fuck up. I didn't ask you, random parent of random kid in hallway who decided to walk by and for some reason felt the need to go tell you that. Like, just shut up. Walk away. Like, no. And also, don't bombard me with your political opinions. I don't give a shit. It's the same thing that I was thinking this morning when I was going on Facebook and I saw these people who were like, vote for Trump or you hate America, or vote for Harris or democracy is going to end. Shut the like, I don't care. I don't want to hear any of your opinions on anything. I hope that by the time this is all over, everybody can just sit down, take a deep breath, and remember that your friends and your family are still your friends and your family. Shut up. Leave me alone. I just want to be left alone. But as a teacher, you have to toe the line. And even in doing this, I never want to alienate people who are left-leaning or are right-leaning. I just want to do a show. So I gave you a little bit of election thoughts, and I think I played it mostly down the middle. That's always the goal. Try to be a nice guy. Trying. Now, Michael Sirkin was here at the very beginning of the show where I had that Arturo Sandoval national anthem playing. It is my favorite national anthem. It is by far my favorite one that I've heard. Now, there's the Chris Bodie one. Chris Bodie, trumpet player, jazz trumpet player. The one that played the national anthem the one year before the Giants game at MetLife, and there were a couple of players that were crying. That's fantastic, but that one's like very somber in its own way because it's kind of muted. But Arturo Sandoval's is like very, very brash and brazen and incredibly high register. And Michael's right, as a trumpet player, appreciated that this morning. Arturo Sandoval's incredible. Love Arturo Sandoval. As a kid, was raised on Maynard Ferguson, who's also fantastic in his own right. But Arturo Sandoval, slightly different, but very enjoyable. Very, very enjoyable. Jamie checks in and says Steve Kornacki is the man. That was the name. I couldn't remember if it was Kornacki or Kornicki. He and John King, they both have those interactive boards. I find it so fascinating. I genuinely do. I am so impressed when they go in. My thing that always shocks me is when they go into the counties and they're, like I said, I'm kind of joking about like Casca up in Schuylkill County, but like Schuylkill's not the easiest word, right? It's not. Even like the Germans would say Schuylkill, right? So like to see it and be like, Schuylkill, cool. If they like pop up Schuylkill County and they're like, I don't know, they say Tamaqua correctly, like good for them. You know, and like we have a bunch of towns in Pennsylvania that are definitely not the easiest to say, but they'll like do that, and then they'll do that in Ohio, and then they'll go poke Florida, and they'll like poke part of the Panhandle, and then they'll poke that county, and they'll poke that little township. I'm like, I don't know how you people understand. How do you have this great of a grasp on geography? I don't get it. But kudos to them. It's fantastic. Ford is here. Spiral Out says, what up, everybody? And Russ. And we're going to get into the sports here in a second, but let's see. JH says, I'm so glad that the incessant ads and texts are done. I want to know in the comments, have you gotten bombarded, not just from the left or the right, have you gotten bombarded with texts from like states that have absolutely no relevance to you? Like, I've gotten texts from people that are running for office in Arizona or from campaigns in Ohio. I'm like, I can't help you. Also, I'm not contributing to your campaigns, but like, leave me alone. Just leave me alone. I am genuinely like just sick and tired of it's the texts, it's the emails, it's the mailbox stuffing. I have lost my mind. I am just over it. I'm so glad that it's almost done. JH says also total BS that there's only two viable parties. Germany system, hell, even the UK parliament system is far, far better than what we have going on here. I always, I said to some friends yesterday, I'm like, I actually do miss being a teacher during election season because what I would frame election day as in my German classes, we would talk about German parliament and all the different parties that are represented. And like, just that it's interesting, right? Like, not that I think it's the better system or the worst system, but like, there are all these different parties that are represented. And like, I do think that that's better than a two-party system, right? Like, I do think that there is actual value in having multiple parties that have the ability at any given point to win an election. So we would talk about German parliament, and then like in the Spanish classes especially, like we would talk about the system usually in Spain. And then in like the AP class, we would kind of talk about how elections have worked in other countries and some of the Latin American countries, and we would kind of compare and contrast. I actually do kind of miss election season as a teacher. It's just a little bit. I don't miss the stupid parents who would send me the emails to say, how dare you say you don't like my candidate or both candidates. Those people can go pound sand. They are insane. Those aren't the people that I miss. But I kind of do miss election season as a teacher, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Spiral Out says, media is good at dictating, not predicting. I think that's probably correct. Mr. Twitster says, the PA commercials have been absolute lunacy this year, and says the best part is if you said half the things you said said in the political ads, your channel would be demonetized and I think it's age restricted for breaking terms of service. Probably. Spiral Out noting about like the commercials on all the like channels, on like the channels that are mostly targeted to the kids. Propaganda on youths, never too young to be indoctrinated. It is interesting because I say to the kids, like, all right, well, what do you think? Like, what have you seen in the ads? And like, they'll tell me what the Trump ads say and what the Harris ads say and the McCormick ads and the Casey ads. And I don't ask them what they prefer, they care, because they don't understand any of this stuff, right? Like, which is good. I do think is good. There might be a parent out there who thinks that it's not good. I think it's good. I don't want my kids to know about some of the things that are in those ads. I don't want to have a conversation about what some of those terms mean. Okay, just, you're little. I'm going to let you be little. Simple. Nico says, I remember in 2016 during Spirit at Catholic school, kids were dressing up as Trump. Entirely possible. I remember the school that I taught at, Phoenixville Area High School. There was a kid one year who wore a MAGA hat to school, which then set off a few other kids. I'll tell you one real quick thing. My favorite thing that I can remember happening, and it happened very, very clearly in an AP Spanish class, is we had a bunch of Hispanic kids who were from Guatemala, Honduras, and Brazil. And they didn't really care about politics, or at least they never vocalized caring about politics. And somebody brought up the election, and it was the Biden versus Trump election, and they were incensed. Okay, they were just absolutely crazy about it. And we had, it was definitely that one. It wasn't the previous one. It wasn't the Trump versus Hillary one. And there was a white girl in the class who was like, I can't believe that anybody would say anything positive about that man in front of our classmates. Meanwhile, the Hispanic kids in that room were like, we don't care. And also, like, why are you speaking for us? It's kind of weird. And I was like, here we are. This is the American society, a microcosm. We'll continue. Jim says, Russ loves politics but hates discourse. Conflicted. I guess. Ford says, I think it's fair to say Harris and Trump are both flawed, so we should not prop up fallible humans as our saviors. Bottom line, however you feel about them, left or right, don't put faith in them. That's the one thing I say to the kids. It's like, they're going to both run on things. They're going to get some of the things done. They're going to get some of the things not done, and that's just how it works. Lawrence and JH both here talking about the Magic TV, the election board daddies. That's great. Good job, guys. Mr. Twitster says, I've gotten texts from Ohio. I don't live there. Go away. Jamie says that she's gotten them from Ohio, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Agree. Jim thinks that they're phishing scams. Recommend that you click on the links just to be sure. But I recommend that you click on the links just to be sure. Don't do that. I'm glad that on iPhone, at least, I have the ability to like block and report as spam. But my God, it's been nonstop. And actually, since the show has started, I've gotten 3 more. Maybe it was just from this morning and I didn't block them. Yeah. And I hate it so much. I'm so glad that it's almost done. Lawrence says, got snail mail from both parties and it all went to the shredder. I'm independent. Leave me alone. Totally fair. Dirch says, European governments are much more fun, like watching a battle royale of ideologies. Who teams up, who turns on who plays spoiler. Correct. Okay. I'm going to make sure that I don't go too crazy here. But Mr. Twitster says, I just don't want to lose any more friends over elections. I still love you. Please stop ruining Thanksgiving. That's fair. That's fair. All right. I'm good to move on. I do hope that all of you go out and vote. I hope that you guys go out. Guys, gals, everybody else, you go vote and do the thing that you want to do. Go vote for the person that you want to go vote for. And I hope that your friends and your family and your neighbors and everybody else, nobody goes crazy. You don't lose friendships. You don't lose family, whatever the hell, over the election. I hope that you go out, exercise your right that people have protected with their lives. Go do that. Go do the thing. And go out and vote. I did. I have my little sticker here. I didn't do the picture where it's like, I voted. I went and did my civic duty. I voted. Go be like me. Maybe I will. But as of right now, I'm not going to. Now, we have some things to get into because on the Philly sports side of things, we've actually had quite the interesting couple of days. Or the interesting, I guess, it was 2 days because we can count Sunday and Monday as the 2 days. Sunday, the Eagles picked up a big win against the Jaguars in a relatively flawed game, a matchup that saw Nick Sirianni try to out big balls Doug Peterson. Not a game that I think a lot of us are going to want to go back and rewatch at any point. It's a game that I went back and I did kind of check out a little bit again. Like I watched it with a neighbor who I haven't watched games with before, and we were kind of talking about Jalen Hurts and whether or not there are like some positive signs. And now if you watch Crossing broadcast on Monday, like some of this is similar. This is like the pro and the con of doing the show across two different channels, I guess, is that sometimes you get the same kind of recap. But I did go back, and when I watched it the first time, I was really encouraged by Jalen Hurts' explosiveness. It's a thing that I've talked about now for the last couple of weeks, that it felt like we were starting to get Jalen Hurts of old, where the acceleration's there, the first step is there, and that the ability to read and find the appropriate running lane is there for him. Whereas in the first 5 games of the season, we saw a couple of flashes, but it looked more like a guy who was either still battling back from being hurt or was maybe being a little bit more cautious to try to make sure that he doesn't tweak an injury. So Jalen Hurts, especially on Sunday, I thought looked every bit like the guy that was the MVP runner-up a couple of years ago. I genuinely went back, and I watched a little bit more of it for a second time yesterday, just to make sure there's a little bit of recency bias. There's a little bit of that part of you that sees it in the moment, and you kind of get yourself hyped up. But if you remove yourself from the emotion of the swings of the game, you go back in and you feel more of a neutral onlooker about did my feelings in the moment match up with what I'm seeing in segments? And it did. And so I felt even better yesterday going back and rewatching some of the Eagles-Jags game, specifically as it pertained to Jalen Hurts, who ended up rushing the ball 13 times for 67 yards. He had some solid runs in that game. I think the thing that was maybe even a little bit more encouraging was his mobility within the pocket, and then his mobility when he did break out of the pocket. The explosiveness appears very much to be either back or almost all the way back. And when you talk about what kind of quarterback Jalen Hurts needs to be and what kind of quarterback Jalen Hurts is going to have to be if the Eagles do want to try to get back to a Super Bowl, it's that multi-layered dynamic player. Jalen Hurts is a pocket passer alone, is a good player. Jalen Hurts is a guy who has time in the pocket and maybe can get outside of it a little bit, but doesn't have the full range of mobility and doesn't have that added element as a runner. To me, is probably not a top 10 quarterback. He's probably top 15, but I don't think he's a top 10 pocket passer. Doesn't mean that I think he's a bad quarterback. It doesn't mean that, we're going with the old Donovan McNabb criticism or the Michael Vick criticism that, these guys are, they have mobility. They're meant to run. No, I think Jalen Hurts, when he has the ability to show a defense that the explosiveness is there, it frees him up. And it also doesn't allow a defensive unit to kind of crash the box as much as they can if he's not as mobile. All of a sudden, you almost have to have a spy on Jalen Hurts that's kind of not blitzing in at every opportunity, that isn't rushing in at every opportunity, because if the pocket does collapse and he steps up, he can kill you, right? like the idea is if you put it in the back of a defense's mind that like, oh shit, if Hurts does get the time and if he does recognize a running lane, he is going to be able to go out and pick up the first down. And he's not the kind of guy who just slides for first downs. He's going to be the kind of guy who lowers the shoulder and actively tries to pick up that extra yard. What we've seen for the last few weeks, I think we saw it against the Bengals, I think we saw it against the Giants, and we certainly saw it against the Jags, is that Jalen Hurts' comfortability in the pocket and getting outside and identifying those rushing lanes, that has gotten significantly better. And all of a sudden, he looks more like that guy that was the MVP runner-up and took this team to a Super Bowl. If that continues, if his health continues to be rock solid, if he continues to maybe get some of those doubts out of the back of his mind about tweaking that knee again, if they all go away and we get this version of Jalen Hurts that we've now seen for at least the last 2 weeks, that's fantastic stuff. That's legitimately great stuff. And it also probably signals that this Eagles team is going to be a real threat. No matter whether you think Nick Sirianni is a good head coach or not, I still don't think he's a great head coach. The talent on this team is the thing that I've gone back to time and time again. It is possible that the Eagles' talent will be able to win in spite of the coach. Now, admittedly, if you go back and you do an actual breakdown of Eagles-Jags, you will find multiple opportunities where Nick Sirianni left points on the board. Multiple opportunities for field goals. Multiple opportunities to kick the extra point instead of going for 2. In fact, some of those decisions led you to a scenario where when Trevor Lawrence got the ball with just over 2 minutes remaining, it kind of felt like the way that the momentum had swung in that game, that the Eagles were going to lose it at Lincoln Financial Field, that they were going to give up a touchdown, and that we were going to have the ultimate conversation be about how Nick Sirianni made a lot of stupid decisions, overly aggressive decisions, going for 2-point conversions when he didn't have to, and ultimately putting them in position where a touchdown, even without the extra point conversion, was going to lose them a game. But instead, we had a great play by Nakobe Dean that sealed the deal. That goes along with a Zach Bond interception. All of a sudden, it appears as though the linebacker core is much better than anticipated, or has at least grown with enough confidence at this point to be at the very least a competent linebacking core, which is a very big positive. We know that the secondary continues to get stronger and stronger each week. We know that each and every game that Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell get to go out and absolutely ball out week in and week out, their confidence continues to grow. And we do know that the pass rush, even if they don't record any sacks like a week ago, or they only get 2 this week, the pocket collapsing that they're able to do, the pressure they're able to generate, and the fact that it speeds up the quarterback's decision-making process, that's big. And that does potentially create those turnovers. It does potentially create incompletions and other plays that are good for this defense to get off the field and get the ball back in the hands of Jalen Hurts. So here we are. The Eagles are now 6-2. They look as strong as just about any other team in the NFC. Now, off on the West Coast, you do have San Francisco that looks like they're starting to get healthier. Christian McCaffrey, if he can stay healthy, is going to be a legitimate weapon for them. Deebo Samuel, if healthy, is a big weapon for them. They haven't exactly made their lives incredibly easy to this point. They're only 500. They're 4-4 at this point. That NFC West division is kind of gummed up. The Cards sit atop. The Rams are in the mix. The Niners are in the mix. Even the Seahawks at 4-5 are in the mix. That's going to be a tough division to win. Detroit looks legit. Detroit absolutely looks like a team that has a mission. They have something to prove this year at 7-1. But there are other teams, like Minnesota looks like a potentially legit team. I'm not entirely sold on Minnesota, but they're a strong team. Green Bay still looks like a pretty damn strong team. The South doesn't really scare me, though. Like, the Falcons are okay. They did come in and beat the Eagles team. You could make the argument that the Eagles kind of beat themselves. But the Falcons are an okay team. The Bucs had some good moments last night against the Chiefs. They didn't win that game. Chiefs remain undefeated at 8-0. But like a 6-point loss at Arrowhead, that to me says that the Bucs are a pretty damn good team. So the NFC to me isn't just like a 1 or 2 horse race. Like I do think that there's a scenario here where if this continues and some of these teams that I've kind of outlined, if you get into a postseason, there is a chance that a lower seeded team could very easily upset a division winner. It is entirely within the realm of possibility. Now, obviously, the season is still young. You're 8 games in, 9 total weeks of the regular season in. I'll be interested to see how it plays out. I feel like the Eagles are definitely in better shape than I expected them to be in. But again, talent is going to win out. Now, A.J. Brown did get hurt on Sunday. It appears as though, reports even as of yesterday, are that there's no significant structural damage to A.J. Brown's knee, that he might miss the game against the Cowboys, but there's a chance that, I guess an outside chance he could play. But they thankfully have been able to avoid any significant structural damage to his ACL, which was one of the initial concerns. But we didn't even get to the guy who blew the roof off the place. I know there's no roof on the link. But there are 2 guys who put up absolutely incredible highlight plays. One, of course, is DeVonta Smith, a legitimate number 1 receiver in his own right, a guy who on many other teams would be the number 1 receiver. It just so happens that he plays on the same team as A.J. Brown. DeVonta Smith made a catch in the back of the end zone that I still cannot understand the physics of. I cannot understand how I get that you can practice a one-handed grab. I understand that. But the body control at that speed and to get both feet down in real time, I thought his knee hit out of bounds. On the first replay, I thought his knee hit out of bounds. I totally missed the fact that he dug his left foot in, that he dug his tootsie toes into the end zone. It was one of the most incredible plays. And honestly, it probably wouldn't have been the play of the week, might have even been the play of the year for the Eagles, had it not been for Saquon Barkley, who did something that was so absurd, so obscene. I have never in my life seen it. I included it in the thumbnail for the episode. Here it is, for those of you who missed it, over top of my head. Saquon Barkley hurdles a guy in reverse. He's breaking open a solid run, spins, okay? Just take a moment, everybody. Just do a little spin real quick, okay? Run down the hallway, spin, and then collect yourself, but not really collect yourself, and then have the presence of mind to turn, leap up, almost like you're going to touch your toes, right? Like we're doing some kind of stationary yoga pose, but, multiple feet in the air, and hurdle a guy in reverse. I have never in my life seen it. I've never seen it even as an attempted play. I don't remember ever watching a high school, a college, or a pro game where somebody attempted it. It is bad shit crazy. And it is probably the play of the year in the NFL. Shannon Sharp said yesterday on First Take that it's almost impossible to imagine that not being the play of the year. There will be highlight catches. But to have the presence of mind to put together that kind of play, an instinctual play. I don't know. I can't imagine that Saquon Barkley, in the midst of that run and spinning, turns around and says, you know what? I'm going to turn my back to this guy and hurdle him in reverse. That's just an instinctual play. Absolutely insane. One of the craziest things I've ever seen in an NFL game. But anyway, the Eagles win that one, and we can all feel good about it. Because despite the fact that Nick Sirianni left a lot of points on the board, the Eagles walk away with a win. And at the same time, Dallas is in free fall, okay? The Cowboys have lost 3 straight games. Now you're going into Dallas, where you've had some trouble winning. And for all intents and purposes, Dallas' season is kind of on the line in this one. I get the fact that it's still early enough in the season, but when you have a Washington Commanders team that does look legit at 7-2, you have an Eagles team that, despite its flaws, still looks legit at 6-2. Dallas can't afford another loss. If Dallas falls to 3-6, the Eagles move to 7-2, you're going to be 4 games back in the win column, right? 4 games back with, what'll that be? 7 games to play? 8 games to play? You're not making up that gap. And I get that they still have more division games. They'll still have the Eagles again. They'll still have the Commanders again. But you're not making up that kind of a deficit, especially to try to leapfrog 2 teams that as of right now look legit. So if you're the Eagles, you have the opportunity to do something that the Phillies, for example, couldn't do this season. You can take out a division rival. This game is more than just a divisional game. This is your opportunity to end the Dallas Cowboys season early. And boy, would that be quite the moment. Like, the funny thing is, if you look at Dallas and you just look at the way that they've struggled just across the board, like they haven't really gotten anything going this year. They had the opportunity to sign Derrick Henry from Tennessee. He ultimately goes to Baltimore. They had the opportunity to sign Saquon Barkley, leaves the Giants, ends up with the Eagles. The Cowboys opted not to go for either of these guys, who in fact both could be considered in the MVP conversation. The Cowboys chose not to go after either of those star running backs. Now, I'm not saying it would have, worked out the same way. I'm not saying that if Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley had gone to that Cowboys team, that they would have the same kind of success that they found with their respective teams. But man, if you're a Cowboys fan today, right? If you're a Cowboys fan this far into the season, through 8 games, you're reeling because the Yankees lost in the World Series. So as a Cowboys fan, that hurts you tremendously. Okay? But even once you put that aside, the Cowboys fans have to be upset. Like, Jerry Jones is absolutely out of his mind. They had 2 legitimate weapons they could have added to their offense, and they chose not to do it. So for the Eagles, critical game this weekend. Go out, put the Cowboys out of their misery, and try to stay on pace with the Commanders, who are still up on you by a half a game. Now I'm going to go out to the comments before we move on to the Sixers, because the Sixers happen to have an off-the-court incident, but then they also had, finally, the debut of a guy that they kind of have very high hopes for. So, okay, here we go. Tony Louie asks, is it possible that Sirianni learned from his mistakes the other day and he'll start kicking field goals sometimes now? No. I think it's virtually a guarantee that Nick Sirianni will continue to coach by his gut. He will continue to make some decisions that are maddening. I did see this counter narrative. Like, obviously people were going after Sirianni about leaving so many points on the board. I am not going as hard after him this week because they ultimately won the game. But I did see this counter narrative out there about how a lot of the decisions were the right decision. It doesn't hurt to go for 2, especially if it could put you up by 3 possessions. You go for it on 4th down instead of kicking a field goal. There are moments where I actually do agree with what the Doug Peterson philosophy was and has been the Nick Sirianni philosophy. I'm fine going for it on 4th and short. I don't really even care that much about field position. If you're on your own 30, then fine. Don't go for it on 4th and 2. But when you're at midfield, I don't know. I look at a punt and I just think about the possibility that the opposition could probably run it out to the 40. So, all right, maybe you're conceding 10 yards, but it does give you the opportunity to continue your drive. I don't usually complain on 4th and 2, 4th and 1. If you're going for it on 4th and 6, early in a game, I'm probably going to question your judgment a little bit. But no, I don't think he's going to fundamentally alter things because they won that game. And he's going to be able to kind of hang his hat on, it didn't work, but we still won. JH in all caps says, Saquon is the best. Love him. Saquon's great. Man, I feel so bad for Giants fans, right? I didn't feel bad for the Giants fans who burned his jersey and who absolutely slandered him. But I do feel bad for the Giants fans who liked Saquon Barkley and wanted their team to re-sign him and then had to watch Hard Knocks and realize that they have absolute dipshits running the team. Not the owner. The owner wanted to keep him, but the people running the team decided to give Daniel Jones all that money. What the hell was the stat that was going around? Daniel Jones had 0 yards, or it was 0 touchdowns and 10 yards or something in a first half. The last time that it happened was 2021, something stupid, some ridiculous stat. Daniel Jones stinks, but that offensive line's also bad. Saquon, he's allowed to flourish behind, even though it's kind of a patchwork offensive line right now. And even though it's an offensive line that hasn't had a ton of reps together, Saquon is shining. And it's also freeing up the passing game, and it's also helping Jalen Hurts. It takes a lot of pressure off him. Kenny Powers Mullet says Dotson's catch, where he tipped the ball to himself around the defender, was pretty crazy too, and kind of got lost behind Smith and Saquon. You're right. That was probably the 3rd play of the game. The tip to himself is a very dangerous play, though. And it's one, I think, did one of those happen in the Dallas game too, in the end zone, and it was a touchdown? The negative, obviously, to tipping it to yourself the way that Dotson did is that if either of those Jags defenders had been even like 5 inches closer, that's probably an interception. So the idea of like popping it back up to yourself is very dangerous, especially with two guys around you. But yeah, it was a great catch. And you hope that that's the kind of confidence play that's going to help Dotson, that like if A.J. Brown is out for this week or if A.J. Brown misses a couple of weeks, that Dotson all of a sudden is going to find his confidence. And that's going to be kind of like the jumping off point for him, where all of a sudden he's going to feel much more confident in this offense and in his own ability. Ford says, Washington is legit. Nick Wright was laughed at for predicting them to win the NFC East. He was. I broke it down on the show. I was more upset with the idea that the Eagles were going to finish third, but I thought that it was crazy that he picked Washington. As of right now, he looks very smart for it. Although he's still, I haven't watched his show in a while, but I don't think he's been giving the Eagles much credit, so I don't know. Nick Wright is a very mixed bag for me. Sean C. says, Sirianni and Moore deserve the same amount of blame. Choosing to go for it's one thing, but the play calls were so bad, James Franklin was laughing. I don't even know. I shouldn't have even mentioned that name. James Franklin. Guy's an absolute fraud. I feel bad for all the Penn State fans who actually thought this year was going to be different against Ohio State, or that this year was going to be different. James Franklin, more like James Fraudlin. He stinks. Penn State fans can never actually explain this to me, and I ask this all the time when I am confronted with a Penn State fan. Because where I grew up, we rooted for Penn State just as a whole, because you don't have like a Schuylkill County team, right? So there was Penn State Schuylkill, which some of us called Harvard on the Highway. But we would root for Penn State. Like, I don't really care. I don't follow college sports that much. If Penn State made it to a national championship, like, I'd cheer for them. Sure. I don't care. I have no allegiances here. Westchester University Golden Rams aren't going to, like, become a D1 school all of a sudden. But if they ever did, they would obviously be my team. But other than that, like, fine. I will passively cheer for Penn State. But I think James Franklin stinks. Because the thing that you always hear is, oh, James Franklin's this elite recruiter. He gets all the best players. Well, then why don't they win? He gets all these elite players, but why don't they ever get over the hump? Is it because he's a great recruiter and not a great coach? Or is it that perhaps he's not as good of a recruiter as people make him out to be and he's still a good coach? Or, like, it doesn't add up. If you're going out and getting the best prospects or many of the best recruits in the country, one would think that that would put you in the national championship conversation every year, and it doesn't happen. John Marks had a bunch of stats the other day that I read on the Press Row Show, but they were insane. Ford throws out here 1-15 at home against top 5 teams under Franklin. That's not good. I mean, that's obviously very bad, okay? Like, historically bad. He's not a great coach. But he recruits well, and those players go on to play in the NFL. So if you're like the parent of a highly touted recruit, sending them to Penn State is a perfectly fine thing. Penn State has a nice campus. Penn State has a good football program. Yes, we all know the black eye or the couple of black eyes that have been on that program. I think James Franklin's a punk for not answering questions that the reporters had a week or so ago about a couple of players that committed or were alleged to have committed a horrible crime and that he deflected. I thought that was a very bad look for the university, especially given one of the black eyes on that program. But this is not a Penn State show. I'm just merely noting that I'm not surprised that Penn State lost. We're going to continue. Jamie checks in over on YouTube and says that the offensive line shuffling shows just how valuable Jeff Stoutland is, which is true. Having a position coach that is as highly thought of as Stoutland is critical. Jordan Mailata is one of my absolute favorite players just because of his path to the NFL and the fact that he became such a dominant lineman. And like that doesn't just happen because you're a genetic freak or a physical specimen. A large part of that is he had to be built from the ground up, and that's Stoutland. Like, I mean, yes, he's a massive human being, Mailata. But Stoutland had to teach him the entirety of football, not just the fundamentals, everything about it. Kudos to him. That's legit. Okay, let's see. Joe Papel says, I'm late for the show and I don't have a Russ-cuse. Joe, just say you were going out and you voted. That's why the show started a little bit late today. I went out and I voted, but I did change the time well in advance of the 8:30. So trying to look out for people. Ford says, death taxes in Penn State losing big games under James Franklin. Guy is a clown. Let's see. All right, so. Oh, and this is good too. Sean C says a lot when Nick Saban tried to get Stoutland multiple times, and he didn't leave. We like Stoutland here at the Russ Joy Show. Okay, so we're done with the Eagles. We were done with the election. And the last thing I want to get to is actually pretty important, and I plan on talking about this more on Friday's show because by that point, we will hopefully have seen him in more games. But last night, very late, it was a 10:15 start or 10:05 start or whatever. The Sixers played the Suns. Now, they lost, but there were positive signs in that game. Tyrese Maxey had himself a hell of a game, 32 points. Yabusele set a career-high 19 points to go along with 7 rebounds and 6 assists. Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon both contributed double-digit point games. But really the thing that everybody was there to see, the thing that Sixers fans who stayed up late were hoping to see, those who woke up early like me this morning and watched the game on DVR, they wanted to see how Paul George was going to fit in this offense. They wanted to see how Paul George was going to obviously work schematically on defense. But they wanted to see what Paul George and Tyrese Maxey were going to look like together. Was it perfect? No. Most notably, the end of the game, the final possession, may be problematic. So to give everybody a recap, Paul George doesn't get to play because of a hyperextended knee in the preseason. He misses the first 5 games of the season. He makes his season debut last night on the road. 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. The thing that will stand out to most people is that on the final possession of the game, Tyrese Maxey defers to Paul George. They don't go for a quick 2. They don't go for a quick 3 and try to get a rebound. They essentially run the clock out. And it's Paul George at the top of the arc. He gets himself set up for a step-back jumper just inside the 3-point line. It rims in and out. Ball gets kind of batted around, comes out to Tyrese Maxey, who launches a 3 just after the final horn blew. Sixers lose by 2. They had multiple leads late in that game. Phoenix ends up winning. Kevin Durant was an absolute man-possessed, 35 points of his own. Actually kind of interesting when you watch it because Bradley Beal did a lot of damage early, but Durant was a consistent throughout the game. Devin Booker, he was part of it, but he wasn't really as much of a factor as you would expect. This really was the Kevin Durant show for Phoenix. Durant ends up being the one to hit the game winner for them. The Paul George of it all is kind of simple. The guy is now trying to work himself back into basketball shape. Played 32 minutes last night. That was, let me go through some of the stats here. I believe that was the 3rd most minutes played by any player, 4th most. Maxey played 41, Caleb Martin played 39, and then Paul George and Kelly Oubre both had 32 minutes played. It was a solid enough debut, and if that had been the first or second game of the season, you'd feel perfectly fine. The problem is that the Sixers are now 1-5 on the season. And it's not all Paul George's fault that he hyperextended his knee and he was out. It's not all Joel Embiid's fault, despite whatever the hell happened in the plan, which we'll talk about in a second, and some of the things that fell out from the plan. It's not even that. It's that your team is decent enough. Tyrese Maxey can be your number 1 option. Other guys on this team very clearly know what their roles are. I think Andre Drummond's kind of taken a step back over the last 2-3 games. Hasn't been as much of a beast on the boards. Certainly wasn't last night. Only played 15 minutes, had 5 rebounds. Not the kind of production you would expect. Maybe he's starting to show that he is more of a backup center than a starter at this point in his career, and that's fine. And whenever Joel Embiid gets back, it'll be nice to have him as the backup center and a spot starter when Embiid can't play. But Paul George's first game ends with him not being able to close out at the end of a game. Now, there are people who watched him with the Clippers, who would say that this is pretty commonplace. I would like to give the guy a full clean slate here in Philly since it is his first season with the Sixers. I'm not going to say that everything that he's done in the past has been perfect or has been the worst thing ever. Let's give the guy an opportunity to find his footing. Let's give him a few games. I probably would have given it to the hot hand, though. I probably would have had Tyrese Maxey have the ball in his hands with the final shot opportunity, especially given some of the clutch shots that he hit down the stretch for the Sixers in that game. You live and learn. Would I have run out the clock like that? No. I'm going to run out the clock like that if I'm going for the 3 and the win, and that would have probably been via Tyrese Maxey. I wouldn't have run out the clock like that just to have a pull-up jumper from, 2 feet in from the top of the arc. But that's just me. But it is good. It's a positive to see Paul George in the lineup for the Sixers, which leads us to our final thing here today, which is the update on what happened between Joel Embiid and Marcus Hayes. Because I know that it's like very early in the episode name, and it's somewhere in the episode description. But everybody has probably seen this to this point. But if your only source of news and truth is the Russ Joy Show, okay? And for some of you, that may be the case. Thankfully for you, I am fair and balanced, okay, in the coverage of these teams. I did a thing like 2 weeks ago. It was the end of October. And I did a thing where I broke down what Marcus Hayes wrote about Joel Embiid. And if you haven't gone and watched that, it's clipped up on YouTube. I removed that segment and I threw it into the clips playlist. But Marcus Hayes wrote that awful lead that invoked the memory of Joel Embiid's brother, who passed away tragically in an automobile accident in their native Cameroon when Embiid was in his rookie season. So there was that. And then he chose to name his son after that brother, and that the article that was published by the Philadelphia Inquirer had an image that featured that little boy, who's not like 16, it's a little kid. And Marcus Hayes kind of went the inflammatory route to set up a story where he essentially called out Joel Embiid for never being healthy and never being well-conditioned, which I thought was bullshit, and I went on a long rant about it. Again, you can go check that out. But what I was absolutely flummoxed by was what happened over the weekend, because it had been, like I said, 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever it was, from Marcus Hayes writing that piece to Joel Embiid last week, coming out, I believe we played it on this show, but Joel Embiid called out Marcus Hayes in the media last week, saying that it was bullshit. The way that he was treated was unfair, that he's done too much for the city to be treated this way, and that, Marcus didn't even show up to talk about it, all of that, okay? Like, none of that happened, which is obviously problematic. And I sat there and I went, all right, all this time has passed, and very clearly, no one between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Philadelphia Inquirer have gotten together and said, we need to try to nip this in the bud. We have to make sure that we get some kind of line of communication set up between Joel Embiid and Marcus Hayes to not allow this to fester, because Embiid was pissed off last week. It wasn't like Embiid just said, I don't like some of the things that have been written, but it is what it is. No, like he definitely sounded angry when he addressed the media. All right, so nobody from the Inquirer, nobody from the Sixers set up a meeting between the two. And what happens over the weekend? The news breaks late at night that Joel Embiid punched Marcus Hayes. That was reported by Keith Pompey, the beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He said that Embiid punched Marcus Hayes, which obviously set Twitter ablaze because, holy shit, that's insane. No matter what somebody writes, a big man like Joel Embiid punching Marcus Hayes, not ideal. Probably makes you think about his fist that's probably like the size of my leg. You're not just getting like this much of the fist to the face. I would assume that Joel Embiid's hand would probably take the entirety of Marcus Hayes' head. Like it would be top of noggin all the way down to jaw. So it's like two fists, right? So I wake up at like 2:30 in the morning and I see this tweet going around about, Keith Pompey saying it was a punch. And then I start seeing actual reporters who said it wasn't a punch, it was a shove. And then the details kind of start coming out. But I'm like, what the hell happened that Joel Embiid felt the need to hit Marcus Hayes? Now, Marcus Hayes is not the most likable guy, all right? On a human level, I have met Marcus Hayes a few times, and he seemed like a perfectly fine human being. But I read some of his stuff, and I'm like, there's so much condescending bullshit in here that, like, I could understand someone not liking him. Last year, there was the controversy because Marcus Hayes wrote the thing about A.J. Brown, right? It said, like, the Eagles have a problem. It wears number 11, and it wears headset. That was talking about Nick Sirianni. He has previously written things about Brett Brown, saying things that Brett Brown didn't say. There have been multiple instances now where Marcus Hayes has written shit that he shouldn't have written, and that, like, an editor probably should have caught, or that a newsroom should have been like, it's probably not ideal. And yet, he continues to get away with it. Now, Mike Sealski, who's also a columnist, has also written some stuff that's gotten him in hot water. Most notably, he wrote the thing about Jake Voracek and a few of the other vets laughing when Aline Vigneault was talking to the media, which led to, in the bubble, Jake Voracek calling Mike Sealski a fucking weasel. So, like, there's kind of a track record now, to some extent, a precedent, if you will, that these sports columnists tend to write things that piss off players or executives or coaches, and it doesn't seem like they ever are held accountable. Well, Joel Embiid shoved Marcus Hayes. Now, Kyle Neubeck did a whole thing. He wrote a couple of things over the weekend about it. There was somebody from the Inquirer morning staff who said that it was an open hand strike or an open hand slap across the neck and the chest area, somewhere in here you would assume. Depending on who you believe, it's more of a shove, certainly not a punch. Either way, not okay. No matter how much you don't like Marcus Hayes, he shouldn't be assaulted in a locker room. Joel Embiid has to know better. And at the same time, I can totally understand how if you invoked the name and the memory of a brother who tragically passed away, who you have since named your son after, I could kind of understand why you might have more of a visceral reaction than if a columnist said, hey, this guy is just fat and lazy and out of shape. It is very different. And yet, how does nobody from the Sixers or the Inquirer work on smoothing this out before those two are actively together in a locker room? It didn't happen. And then from some of the reports, it sounded like it was a minute and a half, 2 minutes between the initial them talking or arguing and the shove happening. How does nobody from PR, how does security, how is there no one that splits them up way sooner, gets cooler heads, sets something up, have them talk? That is like organizational malpractice on the part of the Sixers and the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I made this case on Monday on Crossing Broadcast, but like there's a case to be made that the Philadelphia Inquirer actively sent their own worker, their own columnist, into a potentially hostile environment because they themselves hadn't set up some kind of a meeting between the two. Now, is it possible that the Inquirer tried to take some steps? Is it possible that the Inquirer tried to get Marcus Hayes and Joel Embiid in a room? Maybe Marcus Hayes said no. Maybe Joel Embiid said no. Maybe they both said no. How does no one have the foresight to say these are combustible elements? There are variables at play here that are going to elicit a very visceral reaction. We need to do whatever we can to make sure this doesn't escalate. It seems like nobody thought about it. Like genuinely seems like no one thought of it. Now, Sean C. asks a very pertinent question here. Seems like too much time has passed to give Embiid any type of punishment, or did I miss something? To my knowledge, there has not been a punishment rendered, but the league was investigating it. Now, do I expect that the league is going to go out of their way and say, well, Marcus Hayes shouldn't have written about Joel Embiid's, tragically passed brother and his son? No, I don't expect that. I still think that he's going to get suspended, which in a way is going to be funny because here we are, the Sixers got investigated and the league pretty much said the Sixers lied to their fans about Joel Embiid being healthy, which implies that Joel Embiid was hurt, which meant that the games that he was missing were fair for him to miss. And now it's possible that as he's ramping up to get back in the lineup, now he's going to be suspended because he shoved Marcus Hayes. The Sixers just can't make it easy, can they? They can't just like have a normal basketball season that we get to enjoy, right? Right. I'm going to go out to the comments here. Ford says, Sixers have even exceeded my expectations for how bad they have started the season. There have been games that I think that they've deserved to win, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump. And I think that there are at least a couple of games there where if you have Paul George, you probably do walk away with a win. I'm not going to hold it against a group of role players and Tyrese Maxey for only having one win thus far this season. I'm not ready to go that far. JH says, second obligatory F Marcus Hayes. I don't know where the first one was. There must have been a first one somewhere. Jamie says that she'll third it. Dirch says that he's surprised that it took this long for this Hayes and Embiid altercation. Regardless, Hayes played another stupid game and finally won a stupid prize. Yeah, he could sue Joel Embiid, though, which, not ideal. Ford thinks that Marcus Hayes is a jerk-off. Also notes that it sucks there's no video available anyway of the incident. I bet you there is video. In fact, I would go as far as to say I would almost guarantee that one of the TV cameras in the locker room picked up at least part of it. And given the fact that it took 1.5 to 2 minutes between the start of it and the actual altercation itself, I would bet you that there's an intern or there's somebody who was in that locker room who had a cell phone out. I would almost guarantee you there's footage of it. I'm shocked TMZ hasn't gotten it yet. Jamie also notes that the NBA is still investigated. Ford thinks that he'll definitely be suspended. Michael Sirkin asks about the Flyers. We'll get there in a second, Michael. Actually, no, we'll do it right now. The Flyers made a trade. They got rid of Ronnie Attard, who was okay enough minor league defenseman. They got a guy from Edmonton who played a few games for the Oilers last year, has mostly spent his season in the AHL. It's kind of a nothing burger at this point. I don't know enough about the guy. I'll watch some film on him when he plays for the Phantoms, and I'll come back to you with some thoughts. I think it shows that the Flyers are kind of hoping that they might be able to have another guy in the mix if they need him. They clearly had given up on Ronnie Attard ever being that guy. Let's see. JH says the first F Marcus Hayes was from him up earlier in the chat. So now there's a fourth. There we go. Okay, good. Tony Louie about that Flyers trade says they traded their dirty socks for dirty underwear. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I'll let you know when I get to see the guy play, and then I'll have some thoughts on it. So we've done the Eagles, we did the Sixers, we talked about the election to start the show. Again, I hope everybody goes out and votes, and I hope that ultimately if you have psychos who are in your friends or your family or your neighbors who tell you that they will never talk to you again if you vote for candidate A or B, I hope those people at some point have like divine intervention or they touch grass or something and they come around. But make sure you go out and vote. We're one of the fortunate countries that do. Also, there are a lot of stupid people. And I have to imagine that the people who watch this show or listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, that you're smart people. And so if for no other reason for you to go out and vote, go offset some of the stupid people. There are stupid people on both sides. Go out and place an intelligent vote. Place a well-educated vote. Go out and vote. I don't care who you vote for. Just go vote. That's it. All right. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I hope Election Day is off to a good start. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to go probably move my desk into the main part of the basement where I have the giant TV, and I'm going to have the 4 news networks up, and I'm just going to monitor the election coverage like a psycho the rest of the day. I'll probably stay up until 1 or 2 in the morning waiting for some of the other states to come in and report, and I fully expect that Pennsylvania is going to be a shit show and an embarrassment to the country because it's going to take us until Thursday or Friday to verify the results of the election here. It's not like we knew that Pennsylvania was going to be the state that might ultimately, determine the election. One thing that I did hear on a podcast yesterday, I think it was Somebody's Gotta Win. I think they were talking about how some states have started to prepare some of the mail-in ballots. And it's you take them out of the first envelope, right? Because there's an envelope in an envelope, I think, with the mail-ins. And it's some states have taken the initial step of preparing those ballots to be counted for Election Day. You take them out of the first envelope and you have it instead of having to go out of 2 envelopes on the first, whatever it was. And a few states have done it. Pennsylvania's nah, we don't do that. Pennsylvania's just nah, we're just gonna have envelopes everywhere. It's gonna look like, Christmas morning with, your Aunt Gertrude and your great Aunt Sally giving you, all the Christmas cards. You get a happy Christmas card and a religious Christmas card, and they give you both, and the envelope's over. Pennsylvania's going to screw up. There's no doubt. We're going to be an embarrassment. It even wouldn't surprise me if by the, like, let's say 3 a.m. Wednesday, that like 45 states are ready to like say what happened, but Pennsylvania's going to somehow be like one that's just like, well, we need more time. We need to figure it out. We need more time. I can't handle it. And it's actually embarrassing. JH says, vote early and vote often, as I always say. Don't do this. That's right. Ford says, show us your basement. Pan the camera. No, not doing that, Ford. It's a great basement, though. Love this basement. It's fantastic. Legitimately. Ford says PA is going to take a week or more. Lawsuits abound. This election comes down to like 70,000 votes in 2 to 3 states, divided country. Okay, well, that's true. Tony Louis says the Vegas betting odds on the election changed from 60-40 for one candidate to a pick'em over the last 3 days. Interestingly enough, a coworker of mine lives in Canada, and apparently with one of the sports betting apps, which I won't mention here because they don't sponsor the show, even though I work with them in my day job, they offer odds. You can't bet on it legally in the U.S. There's the offshore books, which you shouldn't use. Or you could, like, I saw Robinhood is like doing some kind of, I don't totally understand it, like future contract thing that allows you to sort of bet on who's going to win. But in Canada and in some of the other like non-U.S. countries, there are sports books that allow for you to vote on the outcome of the election, the outcome by individual state, and I think like something about like the kind of like a spread bet on like the margin of victory in a given state. It's wild. So if you're up in Canada, you can bet on this election and at least, I don't know, enjoy it from the outside. We don't get the benefit of doing that. Let's see. Jim Cochran says being slow and screwing up, 2 very different things. That's fair. Sean C says it wasn't done until Saturday last time. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be crazy. Michael Sirkin says, heard it's illegal for PA to count any mail-in ballots before 7 a.m. on election day. Maybe. Like I said, though, it was like something about the procedure of like having the ballots ready, the mail-in ballots, like having them out of the first envelope or whatever so that it's quicker to process. I don't know. Anyway, I hope everybody goes out and votes. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will be back on Friday, 8:30 a.m. here on The Russ Joy Show. By the way, the drive to 500 subscribers, we are getting oh so close. If you haven't done so already, go subscribe over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube account. When we hit 500 subscribers, within that 7-day window from then until the next show or whatever, I will randomly select, put it like in a wheel. I will randomly select one subscriber to the Russ Joy Show account. That person will win the jersey of their choice worth up to $175. So if you haven't done so already, go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe. If you know some other people who like a little Philly sports talk, some other stuff, and you're like, hey, I think it'd be a really great thing, you should go check out the Russ Joy Show. You should do that, and then remind them to subscribe, and they can get entered to win the jersey of their choice. So everybody have a great rest of your day. I will talk to all of you Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. Have a great day, everybody. Be nice to each other. Talk soon.